Hi everyone. Okay, so today we are going to look at consumer education and we are going to cover what a consumer is, which we should already know. We're going to look at consumer rights, consumer responsibilities. We're then going to go on and look at the laws that exist to protect consumers. We're going to look at the different agencies that consumers can go to, and we're going to look at the complaints process. Okay, so I'm going to try and fly through it as quick as I can on a video, but all the information is on the PowerPoint and there are sound audio files on most of the PowerPoint slides as well to further explain it. Okay, so we all know that a consumer is somebody who buys goods and services for their own use. Okay, and as a consumer, some of our rights, so things that we feel we should be entitled to, would be a good quality product. Okay, so we expect the product to last and not fall apart within a couple of hours. We would expect a fair price. We would expect to receive value for money, and we would expect to be provided with information about that product. Okay, and we would expect the information that we're given to be honest and to be accurate. Okay, so as a responsible consumer then, we have a responsibility to know what our rights are, to know what laws exist to protect us, and to know what agencies we can turn to if we ever do have a complaint. We have a responsibility to keep our receipts, so our proof of purchase, and we have a responsibility to avoid impulse buying and false economies. Okay, so there are two laws that we need to be familiar with for our exam. The first one is the Sale of Goods and Supply of Services Act, 1980, and the year is important, guys. And the second one is the Consumer Protection Act, 2007. Okay, and basically the Sale of Goods and Supply of Services Act exists to protect us from faulty or poor quality products. Okay, and the Consumer Protection Act exists to protect us from false or misleading information. So one is related to the actual products and one is related to the types of information that we're given about each of those products. Okay, so let's take a look at the Sale of Goods and Supply of Services Act 1980. Okay, so this act basically tells us that when we buy a good or when we receive or we buy a service, goods must be four things, okay? So they must be of a merchantable quality. They must be of a sellable, good quality. They must conform to sample. So for example, if I'm buying or curtains and I see a sample in the shop, when the curtains come and get fitted, they must be the same as the sample that I've seen, the fabric. They must be fit for purpose, okay? So if I buy a kettle, for example, I would expect it to boil water. And they must be as described. So this is quite important when we're buying from brochures or catalogues. Argos might be a good example. So the product must be as it's been described in the brochure that it's been sold to you in. Okay, and if any of these four clauses is broken, then that company has breached this act and you are entitled to a form of redress. Okay, so redress is basically compensation. So if you buy a good or a service and it's none of these things or it doesn't meet one of these criteria, you can go back to the company that you bought the product from and you can demand a refund, a repair, or a replacement. Okay, and it's important to note here, if you just change your mind and suddenly decide you don't like anything or you don't like the product anymore, legally the company doesn't have to give you a refund. Okay, they don't need to exchange it for you. Most companies that we shop from will, because they want to have you as a loyal customers, but legally they're not entitled to give you one of these three. It's only if the criteria in the Sale of Goods and Supply of Services Act has been broken. Okay, when it comes to services, and this is all in the PowerPoint, when we're getting a service, so for example, if I had an electrician coming out to fit lights, under the Sale of Goods and Supply of Services Act, the person supplying the service must be fully qualified to do it or to provide it. if he or she is using any material, so for example, if he was bringing light switches, light bulbs, etc., they must be of a merchantable quality as well. But all that information is on the PowerPoint for you to see. Okay, so that's the sale of goods, and that protects me from faulty goods. Okay, so that makes sure the goods that I get are what I'm expecting, they're fit for purpose, and they are of a good quality. Okay, so the next act is the Consumer Protection Act, and basically that protects consumers from false or misleading claims. Okay, and it's false information being given in relation to four areas. So the first one is information about the product. Okay, so a company cannot provide lies about a product. For example, if I was buying cereal and on the box it said 500 grams, but inside there was only 250, I could make a complaint against that company, or I could seek a refund, repair, or replacement. Second is in relation to advertising. Okay, so a company couldn't tell me that they are the most popular company in the whole world according to research if they've never actually conducted any research. Okay, they can't tell me that this product will make me live forever if that is a false claim. Okay, thirdly is in relation to prices, and this tends to kick in a lot when we see sales. Okay, so sometimes you'll see was €15, now €10. If a company is going to advertise like that, the product has to have been at the original price, so the €15, for at least 28 days in a row over the previous 3 months. So they can't just suddenly say this was €100, now it's 80, if it's never been on sale in their shop for €100. Okay, and the fourth way then that this act protects us as consumers is against unfair trading practices. Okay, and that would be salespeople or companies putting extra pressure on customers to buy a product. Okay, so that might be if they say something is on a product is at a certain price for a limited time only. Unless it is actually for a limited time only, they cannot state that to us. Okay, so that's the Consumer Protection Act, but again, much more information on that in the PowerPoint. Okay, so they're the laws. Nextly then are there's 4 agencies that we need to be aware of. Okay, so these are basically third parties that we would turn to if we've had no joy in trying to resolve a complaint with the company itself. Okay, so the first one is the CCPC. Okay, so that's the Competition and Consumer Protection Commission, and basically they exist to provide information to consumers about their rights, to advise consumers, and to ensure that consumers aren't exploited by companies by making sure that there's fair competition in markets. So for example, they wouldn't let Tesco buy Lidl and Aldi and then have ownership of all the supermarkets in this country, because that would be unfair for us as customers because we wouldn't have choice. Okay, the second one is the Consumers Association of Ireland. Again, it's a free service and they provide us with information about our rights. If we feel our rights have been broken, we can go to them to seek advice and guidance. And they're normally our first 2 points of call. Okay. The third one then is the Small Claims Court, and that normally will be a last resort. Okay, so we would go to them if we've had no joy dealing with the CCPC or the Consumers Association of Ireland. They charge €25 to process a claim, and the maximum compensation that you will receive from them is €2,000. Okay, so what comes up a lot in the exam is to recommend an agency for a certain person to go to, and it's normally these 2 that we'll suggest first. In the mock exam, a good few people wrote Ombudsman, but it's important to note that we only go to the Ombudsman if we have a complaint against a public sector company. So if you have a complaint against a school, maybe against the local county council offices, against a hospital, then you would go to the Ombudsman. Okay, so there are agencies, and then the final thing we're going to look at is complaints. Okay, so basically you need to know the different steps involved in complaining. And step 1 is basically to return to the shop and speak to the manager. Okay, so when you do that, you should have your proof of purchase and you should have the product. If you've had no joy doing that, then you might issue a formal letter of complaint. Okay, so in your letter, obviously, you'll outline and explain the issue. You'll include a copy of your proof of purchase, your receipt, and you'll explain what form of redress you would like to receive from the company. And at that point, if you still have no joy, then you could go to a third party, so the Consumers Association of Ireland or the Competition and Consumer Protection Commission, and they will help you or support you then in trying to resolve the issue. And if at this stage the complaint still hasn't been resolved, then you would go to the small claims court. Okay, so that's our really quick run through of all those topics. What I would recommend is maybe you go back through the video, pause it at certain points and make notes, but there are notes on all of this in the PowerPoint, and there's activities to complete as well in the PowerPoint just to test you on your knowledge. Okay, the only thing I haven't covered in the video is your rights for online shopping. Okay, so it's important that you go back to the PowerPoint and have a read through those.